Okay, good evening, everyone. We are holding over here a new Parsha, Parshas Terumah, which is really the major transition from everything we've learned about so far in Sefer Shmos to where we're going to arrive tonight and carry us to the end of the Sefer of Shmos. And that is, we were a nation that was taken down to Mitzrayim. We were slaves. We were persecuted. We had many hard times. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu made miracle after miracle, one nace after the other, the Makkahs, the plagues, the splitting of the sea. He saved our nation. We saw the yichud, the unity, and the oneness and the intimacy that Klal Yisrael has with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that carries us to Har Sinai. Har Sinai, we are rewarded with the greatest gift of all kind, the Torah. And we're now this Torah nation that knows that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us, and He makes miracles for Klal Yisrael. And after all is said and done, HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands us in this week's Parsha, Parshas Terumah, that v'asuli migdash v'shechanti b'soichem, you must make for me a migdash, v'shechanti b'soichem, and I will dwell amongst you, I will dwell inside of the Mishkan itself. There's a question in this pasuk that has bothered me for many, many years, and I never had a very good teretz, a very good answer to explain what it means. And today, Baruch Hashem, I saw in the Oznaim the Torah that he asked this question and he answers it. And I saw also Rav Hirsch goes along the same lines. We're talking about the building and the constructing of the Mishkan, which is the tabernacle that Klal Yisrael is going to build in the Midbar, in the wilderness itself. Eventually, we're going to go through 40 years of journeying around, wandering around. We'll come into Eretz Yisrael, and eventually there will be a king by the name of Shlomo HaMelech, and he is going to build what's called the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash, the holy temple in Yerushalayim, will stand, it will be destroyed, we'll go into exile, we'll come back 70 years later, it will be rebuilt again, and we'll have a second Beis HaMikdash. But that's the Mikdash, that's the Beis HaMikdash, the house of Mikdash, of Kedusha, of sanctity, there in Yerushalayim, in Eretz Yisrael. And over here in the wilderness, we're building the Mishkan. That is the command. Build the Mishkan for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Hashem, who of course is well aware of grammar, and He's well aware of every word that He writes with His holy pen, He's telling the Jews in the Midbar, in the wilderness, when they're getting ready to build a Mishkan, which is what the entire Parsha is all about, He says, "V'asoli migdash, make for me a migdash," which is what they're going to build when they get into Eretz Yisrael. In the Midbar, in the wilderness, they're building a Mishkan. In the Eretz Yisrael, they're building a migdash. So why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell Klal Yisrael, while they're in the desert and they have to build a Mishkan, V'asuli migdash, make for me a migdash. You're not making a migdash, you're making a Mishkan. So this is not only bothers me, this is something that bothers many of the Mefarshim, the commentators. Why did Hashem use the word migdash instead of Mishkan over here? And furthermore, in this pasuk, famously, it points out, if you make for me a migdash, v'shechanti b'soichem, I will dwell, it should say in Hebrew, v'shechanti b'soicha, I will dwell inside of it. If you build for me a Mishkan, which is going to be the place where the Shekhinah is going to reside, so then v'shechanti b'soicha, I will dwell inside of it. And yet we know famously that it says v'shechanti b'soicham, I will dwell inside of you, seemingly talking about Klal Yisrael. So you're building a Mishkan, now we're calling it a Mikdash. You're building a Mishkan so that the Shekhinah should dwell inside of there, but I want to dwell inside of you. So the Oznaim the Torah writes something that is so powerful and eye-opening to what it means to be a Jew, to be a member of this nation. If only if we could remember what he says, that will be one plus. If we could believe what he says, it'll be even a bigger plus. And he writes like this, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kadesh es Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mekadesh, He sanctifies Klal Yisrael. Umasulem es hakoyach lekadesh kol davar, and He's given us the ability to be mekadesh, to sanctify everything. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mekadesh. He sanctifies. He gives us kedusha, holiness and sanctity. And part of what He's done by being mekadesh us, by sanctifying us, is He's passed the baton over to Klal Yisrael, that we in turn have the ability to be mekadesh kol davar. We could sanctify everything. Whatever a Jew touches, whatever a Jew gets himself involved with, whatever we are doing, a Jew has the opportunity, if they want to, if they pay attention, if they are aware of what is going on, they could be mekadesh, they could sanctify everything. Now we'll have to describe, what does it mean to sanctify something? What does it mean that Hashem is mekadesh, that He makes us kodesh, He makes us holy? What does it mean that we ourselves in turn can be mekadesh? We can sanctify and make things holy. Anything, says the Iznaim Torah. Asher yitzav lehem, and we see that HaKadosh Baruch has in fact commanded us, like we say, mekadesh Yisrael. We say on Yom Tov, we say Mekadesh Yisrael Bazmanim, that the Jewish people, not only are we the ones that are becoming holy, but we have the ability to pass on that holiness to everything that we come in contact with. Ve'mekadshim es hazmanim. The Jewish people are the ones we're going to come. Purim is not a Chag, it's not one of the 3 festivals, but we are also, when we come to Purim in just less than 2 weeks' time, we are the ones that are going to be Mekadesh. We will sanctify the holiday of Purim. In a couple of months, we're going to come to Pesach, and we will say the words in our davening, Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim, which means the Jewish people are the ones who are sanctifying the Yom Tov of Pesach. It's not that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that is giving it its Kedusha. The power of Klal Yisrael is, we down here in this world have the ability to be Mekadesh, to elevate and sanctify whatever it is that we lay our hands on. And he goes on further, Ulefikach, and therefore, it doesn't say in our pasuk, in our verse, V'asuli Mishkan. It doesn't say, make for me a Mishkan, which is our question. We're talking about the Midbar, we're talking about Klal Yisrael building a Mishkan. It should say, V'asuli Mishkan. Says the Islamic Torah, no. It cannot say that word. Why? Ach v'asuli Migdash, make me a Migdash. Why? Shem Yikadshu, I want you to be, I want that Klal Yisrael are the ones that are going to sanctify this edifice. As HaMishkan v'Haya Kodesh. Klal Yisrael are the ones that are going to sanctify the Mishkan, and they are going to make it Kodesh. They are going to make it holy. HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs a bias, He needs a house. HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs a place to hang His hat at the end of a long day. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants a place where He can commune one-on-one with every single Jew that's going to come there. Hashem wants a place where He can reveal Himself and His miracles. There were 10 miracles that were taking place inside of the Mishkan, inside the Beis HaMikdash, constantly whenever a person needed a little bit of chizuk, a little bit of inspiration for their emunah, inspiration to get closer to Hashem, inspiration to understand what it meant to be a Jew. They would just walk into the Mishkan, or later they would walk into the Beis HaMikdash and they would see 10 open miracles in front of their eyes. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's not me that's going to create the Kedusha, the sanctity in the Mishkan. It's not me that's going to force my Shekhinah, my divine presence, into the Mishkan. It's not me that's going to make it into a miraculous edifice where all miracles in the world could be seen in front of the eyes of Klal Yisrael. He says, Yidden Klal Yisrael, I want you to be the ones that are going to be Mekadesh. You be the ones that are going to elevate and sanctify and bring the Kedusha to the world down here. And therefore, it doesn't say, V'yasali Mishkan, make me a Mishkan. Of course you're making a Mishkan, we know that. What he's telling us is, you are the ones that are going to make this place Kodesh, full of Kedusha, and then it will be the Mishkan in which I'm able to rest my Shekhinah inside. And this is reminiscent of the words of Rav Hirsch himself, who explains that the Mishkan was nothing short of one of the greatest miracles in the history of the world. You could take all of these materials that are in the world, gold and copper and silver, wool and linen and wood, and you can transform them into a bias, into a house that is going to allow the Shekhinah to come and rest in this world amongst us. How could a human being, flesh and blood, down here in this world, how can they harness all of these materials together, put them together as it says in the Torah so explicitly, all the ways that we're supposed to do it? And that wooden structure, that golden menorah, that copper Mizbeach altar, that somehow is going to bring down the Shekhinah into this world. The Shekhinah is not bound by time. He's not bound by space. He doesn't like materialism. He doesn't have a body. He just is the Shekhinah, divine presence. So how can the Shekhinah come into this world, into this Mishkan, which is made out of physical, material matter? Says Rav Hirsch, this idea, because Klal Yisrael, when they started working and putting everything together and building the Mishkan, they were Mekadesh. They sanctified all of the physical, material items of this world. And through their Kedusha, through their holiness and their sanctity, they elevated the gold to Kedusha. They elevated the Nechoshes, the copper, to Kedusha. They elevated the acacia wood to Kedusha. They elevated the linen and the wool to Kedusha, and the dyes that would make the wool different colors. They elevated into Kedusha, to a world of sanctity. And so it's no longer a piece of wood. It's a piece of the Mishkan. It's no longer a piece of gold. It is now the Kedusha of the menorah. It's no longer wool. It's now the paroiches. It's going to be the curtains that are hanging in the Mishkan. They elevated everything into a realm of total sanctity. That's the power of a Jew. The power of a Jew is he can take the most mundane, simple thing in this world, which looks like it's nothing more than a piece of food. It looks like nothing more than an article of clothing. It looks like nothing more than some cement and iron to be able to go and build his house. It looks like nothing more than his computer. It looks like nothing more than his car. But if a Jew does things in the right way, he elevates everything into a world of Kedusha, so that the Shekhinah is going to dwell over there. Many years ago, when I was a Bacher learning in Eretz Yisrael, we made a siyum. Our first siyum in the Gemara over there was on Masechta Megillah. And that night we made a siyum in the dormitory / apartment of the yeshiva. And one of the Gedolei Ador, one of the great rabbis of the generation, Rav Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg, Zeichet Tzadik Livracha, came to that siyum because our Rebbeim were his students. Rav Scheinberg, if anybody's ever seen pictures, he wore about 100 pairs of talis cotton. He was like a mountain of tzitzis. He wore his tefillin all day. If you ever walked into his apartment, you could literally feel what it means, v'shechanti b'seichem, that the Shekhinah was dwelling there. It was a palpable feeling. The air was so thick in that apartment, you felt like the Shekhinah is right there. So he came to our siyum. And after, which was a whole thing in of itself, we were so honored and so overwhelmed, and he's sitting right there in our apartment at our table, giving us a schmooze about being happy, and Torah is what makes you happy. At the end, he left. And he had a student who would drive him everywhere, Asa Widow, I believe was his name, and he had a little car, and it was the Rosh Yeshiva's car. He would drive Rav Scheinberg wherever he had to go. And I just remember watching him float down the stairs to go into the car. And as he got in the car and they drove away, I kid you not, it's like you could just see the aura of light that was encompassing and encircling that car. Because if you're a holy man and you live your life with holiness and with Kedusha, says the Oznayim the Torah, Maser lehem es hakoyach lekadish kol davar. The Jewish people have the ability to be mekadesh, to sanctify everything. Your car becomes holy. Your table, Rav Yaakov Yosef Herman happened to have been the father-in-law of Rav Scheinberg Zatzal. He lived in America for many, many years. He was one of the great builders of Orthodox Jewry in America in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And his house was the address for anyone that needed anything in the Jewish world. All the great rabbis that were traveling from Europe at the time that were coming to raise money for the yeshivas, all of the biggest tzaddikim, they stayed in his house. On Shabbos afternoon, Shabbos morning by the lunch, and the Shabbos dinner, the table was filled always with guests, 10 guests, and 20 guests, and 30 guests. People were sleeping, their kids learned how to give up their rooms at young ages to have guests that were traveling through to sleep in their rooms. That's how it worked in the Herman house. It was a house that was filled with chesed all the time, achnasas orchim, always doing acts of kindness and bringing guests into the house. That was like their great mitzvah. Later in the years, Rabbi Herman decided that he and his wife were going to make aliyah, and they're going to move to Eretz Yisrael. And they had to begin deciding what are they going to take from the house and what are they not going to take from the house. It was not before, in the primitive days, there were no such things as lifts like we have today, where you can just shove all of your house from America inside of a box and they take it to Eretz Yisrael, and then voila, America ends up in Yerushalayim, lo and behold. It wasn't like that back then. You had to be very careful, you had to be very choosy what you wanted to take. So he told his wife, we're taking our dining room table. She said, Yaakov Yosef, the table is so old, and it's so big, and it's so heavy. She said, we're going to go to a small little apartment in Yerushalayim over there. We'll find a new table that will fit the bill over there. He said, no. He says, we're taking this table. He said, this table has been in our dining room for the last 30-something years that we live here. Do you know how many Shabbos meals were served at this table? Do you know how many guests sat at this table? Do you know how many brachas were said at this table? Do you know how many zmiros, how many songs were at this table? Do you know how many Gedoylei Yisrael, great rabbi, sat at this table? Do you know how much Kedusha is in this table? We're taking the table with us. This is what a Jew is able to accomplish. They turn a piece of wood with some legs, they turn it into something of Kedusha, of holiness. What we say at the table, how we act at the table, how we eat at the table, the brachas that we say at the table, we're adding in more and more and more Kedusha with everything. And then he continues, V'yasali migdash, make for me a migdash, v'az v'shechati b'seichem. When you make for me a migdash, which means when you sanctify the Mishkan, then I will dwell amongst you. Nimsa shaloi b'mishkan yishra Hashem es shchinasai. Listen to these words. You see from this pasuk over here, it's not that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, make me a Mishkan, and then I'm going to dwell inside the Mishkan. That's not what my goal is. That's not my objective, says Hashem. Ela b'kedushas Yisrael. Rather, I will dwell in the kedusha and the holiness of Klal Yisrael. Sheyosifu el binyan ha-mishkan, and that's even greater than the building of the Mishkan itself. The Kedusha that is in every single Jew. The Kedusha that we infuse into the Kalim, into the vessels of the Mishkan, into the wood, into the copper, into the gold, into the silver. That is greater than the actual Mishkan itself. That's why it says, V'shechanti b'seicham, I will dwell amongst you. Like it says, V'nigdashti b'seich b'nei Yisrael. Elsewhere, later in Vayikra it will say, I am V'niskadashti, I will become sanctified amongst Klal Yisrael. U'b'toich kedusha zu, and through this kedusha of Klal Yisrael, Tishkoin hashchina, the Shechina is going to dwell. The Torah is telling us something that is, if we would just live with this belief, we'll realize that everything that we do in our lives has opportunity to bring Kedusha down to this world, Kedusha to our homes, Kedusha to our tables, Kedusha to our clothes, Kedusha to our food, Kedusha to our marriages, Kedusha to our children, Kedusha to our shuls. Everything that a Jew does, he's responsible to be the one that is Mekadesh, that is going to bring the holiness and the sanctity here. It doesn't work that Hashem waves his magic wand and says, poof, you're a holy person. Poof, the shul becomes a holy place. I remember when we left the old shul, it was very hard for me to part with that shul. We were there for, at the time, 12 years. And in the final weeks that we were in the old building, I was like reminiscing of all the things that transpired in that main room over there. All the davenings, all the Yomim, the Royim, all the Rosh Hashanah, the Yom Kippur, the blast of the Shofar, the Purim and the Megillah and the Pesach and the events and the programs and the Shir. I was just reminiscing. And I thought to myself, just like Rabbi Yaakov Yosef Herman, imagine how much Kedusha has been absorbed in the walls of this one room where we davened and we prayed and we learned for so many years together. And I said that when we come to the new shul, it's like 5 times the size. I says that means we're going to have to work 5 times as hard to make sure that the Kedusha gets absorbed in the walls and the floors and the ceilings and the bima of this shul. And that Kedusha, that's all up to us. How much we're going to work on becoming holy, how much we're going to work on being a conduit of the Shechina, how much we're going to try, like Rav Hirsch writes, in the building of the Mishkan, I want to elevate the material world around me to things that are more ruchni, more spiritual, more kedusha that's involved. Then I'm Mekadesh, I myself, the Jew, has a power to sanctify and make holy everything that is down here in this world, and in that way I bring down the glory of the Shechina into my life, and anyone that's around is going to be affected positively as well. Now, the Ramchal has a sefer called Mesilas Yesharim, Path of the Just, something that almost every Jew in the world has, or at least is with the program, knows about this sefer. It's the guidebook of how to be a proper Jew. It teaches us one level after the other and one chapter after the other how to strengthen ourselves in the world of Avodas Hashem and understanding what our purpose in the world is, and how to be attached to the Ribbono Shel Olam and make the right decisions and run away from the wrong things and run to the right things. A person who doesn't learn Mesilas Yesharim, it's hard to know how they could be functioning as a religious Jew, because this is the textbook of how we're supposed to do it. At the very end of the Sefer, after you've been through like 10 levels of ascension, of getting holier and holier and holier, the final level that a person can reach is called Kedusha. Kedusha, holiness. That's like the final level. So here we see that in the Parsha, V'asali Migdash, every single Jew has the power and the ability to be Mekadosh, to sanctify everything. You should know that Kedusha is the highest level. It's the last level in the rung of the ladder that's going to bring you up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he writes over here something that fits into our words exactly. He says, HaKadosh, what does it mean to be a holy person? What is holiness? What is the world itself is at loss of what is Kedusha, what is holiness? Hadavek tamid v'eloikav, someone that is clinging to his God constantly. V'nafsha mishaleches bein hamuskalos ha'amitiyos, his nefesh, his soul is always traveling amongst the wisdoms, the divine wisdom. Be'avas boiroi v'yirasai, with tremendous love and fear and awe of his Creator. He now is considered to be someone that is traveling and together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the land of the living, which means in the world to come, even while he's down here in this world. A Kadosh, a holy person, who is Dovid, who is clinging to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tamid, constantly, which means he finds some way to remove himself from all the physical things that are going on in this world, and he's attached now to the Shekhinah. Even while he's in this world, it's as if he's in the world to come. Vehine ish kazeh, a person who lives his life like this, who atzmai nechshav kemishkan, that person is considered to be a mishkan. He is the tabernacle. He is the dwelling place. V'asali migdash v'shechanti b'seicham. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is coming and dwelling in him. Kamigdash ukamizbeach. He's like the mishkan. He's like the migdash. He's like the mizbeach, like the altar. K'maymarim, like it says about Yaakov, v'ya'al me'olav Elokim, Hashem ascended from Yaakov. As if Yaakov Avinu himself was like a mizbech, like an altar, like a mishkan, and Hashem descended from on top of Yaakov, which means Yaakov's the one that is bringing the Kedusha. The Kedusha is generating and emanating from him, and Hashem is there resting on top. And then he adds over here, Ha'avos heinena merkava, the avos hakadoshim, our forefathers, they're like the chariot on which HaKadosh Baruch himself rides in this world. Kabbalistic idea. All of the forefathers, they're part of the Hashem's chariot. And just like the rider sits inside of the chariot and he was able to ride through wherever he has to go, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if he wants to go through this world, so to speak, he has to have a chariot upon which he's going to sit on. And who is the chariot of Hashem? The Avos, our great forefathers and ancestors. Ki Ashchina shoira aleihem, because the Shechina dwelled upon them. Kama shahaisa shoira b'migdash, just like it dwelled in the Migdash. Exactly what we're saying. If a person will makadesh, will sanctify themselves, a person will elevate themselves, a person will take the things around them and add kedusha and holiness to it. So then, just as the Shekhinah was dwelling inside of the Mishkan, and the Shekhinah was dwelling inside of the Migdash, inside the Beis HaMikdash, Shechanti b'soicham, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm going to dwell inside of you as well. And as the Islamic Torah says, that's even greater than the Mishkan itself. That means, as we know, that every single person is a Migdash Ma'at. We are all a microcosm of the Beis HaMikdash. The Nefesh HaChaim goes to great lengths to show Kabbalistically how every part of the human being corresponds to another part that's inside of the Beis HaMikdash. The kelim, the vessels, the way that things are set up, so on and so forth. Because the way that we live our lives and the way that we dedicate ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the way that we bring the Kedusha on ourselves, so we are no less, if not even more, than the physical edifice of the Mishkan that was here in this world, there in the wilderness, and eventually the Mikdash that dwelled in Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim. Every person is a Mikdash. Every person can be Mekadesh themselves. Every person can elevate themselves to levels that we never dreamed of getting to. It doesn't mean that you have to sleep on the floor. It doesn't mean that you have to walk across a bed of nails. It doesn't mean that you can't eat anymore and you have to starve yourself. It doesn't mean any of that. As a matter of fact, the Ramchal in the Mesilas Yesharim, he's very against all of that behavior. That's not the way to get to the holiest of things. The way to get to real Kedusha is, I'm living in this world. I'm a member of Olam Hazeh, of this world. But I know how to use everything that's in this world to be able to elevate it and raise it and bring it to a place of Kedusha, of holiness. And this is the task of every single Jew. And this is, he's saying over here, it's not even like lofty beyond our dreams, beyond our grasp. Everybody could do that in their own special way. You can turn a table into a vehicle of Kedusha. That's why he writes over here, based on Chazal, when a person that is holy, when he eats food, it's like a sacrifice that is brought upon the altar on the fires. Because so I don't know if you can turn a 42-ounce steak into a holy in convocation. I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure if a 34-ounce latte every single morning can turn into a holy drink. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if, as I once saw a guy walking down the street, there's like big gulp, there's super big gulp, and then there's like super duper big gulp. It's like this big and has a handle, and the guy's walking down the street like this. I'm not sure that you can do that with that size big gulp. But certainly if we do things in the right way in this world, and we use the things that we need and we're going to take advantage of in the physical world, and we elevate them and we raise them up little by little by little by little, so then everything we're doing goes into a realm and a world of Kedusha, of holiness. And a person that is holy feels like a very different person than the unholy world in which we live in. A person whose drive in the world is to be Mekadesh himself and be Mekadesh the world around him, he's always working and living in the world in a different way. Because it's always an opportunity that I can elevate this, and I'll elevate this meal, I'll elevate this conversation, I can elevate my clothing, my shoes, and so on and so forth. We were just in Eretz Yisrael, it's already a month ago, and Shabbos, so I was wearing my Shabbos clothing in Eretz Yisrael, my Shabbos shoes, and I ended up after Shabbos in Bnei Brak by an amazing Achnas Sefer Torah, dancing in the streets of Bnei Brak, being part of a major siyum and the festivities and dancing and everything. And when I came back, so the first Shabbos back in LA, I thought to myself, wow, these shoes last week, they were walking the streets of Yerushalayim and dancing in Bnei Brak. They're different shoes right now. And that's what we're saying over here. Everything that a person does in their life, this is language over here, that you could be Mekadesh, you have the ability to be Mekadesh, sanctify everything, if we do it in the right way. Now, you shouldn't get overwhelmed, because if you're thinking about Kedusha, sanctify, you get nothing accomplished. But maybe at least one thing a day, 2 things a day, we can think to ourselves, I'm responsible to be Mekadesh this. Maybe it's my cup of coffee. In the morning, it becomes a cup of Kedusha. Maybe it's my lunch. Maybe it's my time in the car. You know, if you use your car for chesed, Rav Shimshon Pincus Zatzal, he would have become one of the Gedolei Yisrael, but his life was taken short in a tragic car accident. He was already passed away, probably somewhere in his 50s. He was already a giant at that time. He had a very unusual habit, and that was he would drive people anywhere they had to go. Even if he wasn't going in that direction, he would tell, I'm going in the same direction, come, jump in. He had a car, which in his town of Tifrach was not so common to have a car. And he said, if I have a car, I'm going to use it for one thing, chesed. I'll be a shuttle. I'll take people from here to there, wherever it is they have to go. He once had a person, he was driving down the road, and there's a guy hitching from Tifrach, and he says, where are you going? He says, I'm going to Yerushalayim. Oh, unbelievable, I'm also going to Yerushalayim. That was a far ride. I'm also going there. He says, where are you going? He said, I have to go to some place over here. I said, unbelievable. I'm going to the exact same place. Come. He gets in the car. He drives in there. And Rav Shimshon Pincus drops him off. And he says, look, here's my phone number. I'm going to go take care of my business. When you're ready, just call me. He dropped him off. And Rav Shimshon Pincus had nothing to do in Yerushalayim that day, at all. But he went to a Beis Midrash, he sat down and he learned, and the phone rings, whatever, is 2 hours later, and he says, Rabbi Pincus, unbelievable, I just finished my meeting also, perfect, I'm coming to pick you up. And he comes, and he picks him up, and he puts him in the car, and he never told the guy that he wasn't going to Jerusalem, that he waited for 2 hours for him. He never told him. If Hashem gave you a car, and not everybody has a car, what's the car for? For chesed, that's what he said. And that means that every person that sat down in that passenger seat, and every ride that he gave, and every mile that he drove, and every time that he had to fill up another tank of gas and put another person, everything, he was mekadesh again and again and again, elevating his car, elevating his vehicle. This is the opportunities that we have, Baruch Hashem. We have a lot of gashmias. We have a lot of physical things. We have a lot of materialism. We have a lot of objects. We have a lot of possessions. So it can't be all about the possession itself. It's how can I elevate that possession. When we moved to Los Angeles, so in the beginning, we were renting a quaint house. And my in-laws, God bless them, very, very generous people, they wanted to give us a house. And in their mind, it had to be a certain investment worthwhile for them. And we looked at a house, and the house that we looked at, I believe at the time, was probably about as big as the apartment building that my wife and I were living in before we moved to Los Angeles. And I said to my wife, this is crazy. How in the world can we take such a house? This is crazy. We lived in a small little apartment. We're very happy over there. We don't need such a thing. I called my Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Aaron Feldman, who is a very holy man, by the way. He knows what Kedusha is. And I explained to him the situation, and I explained to him the very generous, loving offer of my in-laws, and I asked him, what are we to do? And I explained size, everything. So he said to me the following words. He said, a house is only gashmias, is only physical and material, if you use it for only material and physical pursuits. He says, but if you make the center of your house, and you make it the mission of your house, that it should be open for chesed all of the time, and you should always have hachnasas orchim, you should have guests over, and you should make sheva brachas in your house, and you should make a bris in your house, and you should have big sudas and events in your house, and you should even make a wedding in your house. He says, if you use your house for mitzvahs, then it's not gashmias, it's not material, it's ruchnias, it's spiritual. Because as we're learning over here tonight, you're mekadesh, you're elevating and lifting everything up to a level of kedusha, of holiness. And so with those words of advice of the Rosh Hashiva and his bracha, we moved into the house, and literally, kimat mamish, from day number one, it worked out literally that when we first moved in, my Rabbi from Baltimore came, stayed in our house. The house has like a turnstile of guests that have stayed and stay there. Meals, I don't know how many thousands and tens of thousands of meals we've been zeicher to serve out of our kitchen. How many thousands, if not tens of, thousands of guests that have come through. And we did make many Sheva Brachas, and we did make bris, and then eventually, Baruch Hashem, about maybe 10 years ago, I had a student who wanted to get married, and he and his wife didn't have so much money to make a wedding, and to rent a hall is expensive, as anybody knows. I said, you know what, why don't you make your wedding in our house? And he said, really? I said, sure. I said, here in the living room, in the dining room, this will be what's called the Chassan's Tish, where we're going to sign the ksuba. And over there in the living room, that would be the bidekin, where the kala is going to sit in a chair, everyone will come and give her brachas. In the front yard, we're going to make the chuppah. And in the backyard, we're going to make the party with the dancing and the catering. And sure enough, we turned our house into a wedding hall that night. And then we were zeicha throughout COVID as well. When people couldn't make weddings in halls, we had chasanas in our backyard. And I think we also had another chasana in our backyard as well. And if you use the house as a davar shebekedusha, it's no longer gashmis. It's no longer material. It's no longer indulgent. It's no longer luxurious. It becomes a davar, something that has the kedusha that a person infuses in there. And that's what we learn from V'asuli Migdash. Hashem knew exactly what he was saying. He didn't say V'asuli Mishkan because he wanted to drive the message home to Klal Yisrael. You are responsible for the Kedusha that's going to be in the Mishkan. It's not me, says Hashem. I can't even bring my Shekhinah down there unless you're Mekadosh, unless you elevate and you sanctify everything. Once that you do, I will dwell amongst each and every single one of you. And that's even greater when you become the Mishkan. It's even greater perhaps than the Mishkan itself, because you are the traveling Mishkan. Wherever you go, whatever you're doing, whatever you're eating, wherever you're sleeping, wherever you're on vacation, wherever you're in the car, wherever you're in the office, wherever you are and whatever you are involved with, a Jew could, as he writes over here, they have the koyach to be mekadesh kol davar, to sanctify and elevate everything. We should be zeicha be'ez Hashem as we go through the parshas of the construction and the building of the Mishkan, and we see how exact and precise everything was in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's eyes, so that it should be the perfect dwelling place for the Shekhinah. We should make ourselves into this Mishkan down here in this world, this Migdash Ma'at, this microcosm of the Beis HaMikdash, of that dwelling place of Hashem. And then wherever we will go in our lives and whatever we are doing, we could be a conduit, we could be a receptacle and a clear vessel that the Shekhinah can come and dwell, V'shechanti b'seicham, amongst all of us, Be'ezras Hashem.